Very welcome to episode 133 of the Shortlist. My name is Johnny Campbell, the CEO and co-founder of Social Talent, and I'm your host for today's podcast and live broadcast. And I'm broadcasting today from the home of Guinness here in Ireland, the Guinness Storehouse. So for those of you who are watching live, you can see behind me a background of this number one tourist attraction in Ireland, which is a visitor area where they show you how to make Guinness. And I'm broadcasting on the day of International Women's Day. And I'm here today because I'm at the Talent Summit, a conference for senior HR folks here in Ireland, the largest of its kind, where we're discussing the new world of flexibility, international work, some of the challenges that organizations are going through around the tug of war, as it's framed from the Talent Summit conference today, between employers and employees and what's happening. And this is against the backdrop of tech layoffs dominating the news headlines. We know the availability of talent may have increased, or at least that's certainly the perception. However, it's still a really tight labour market in most countries, and it continues to be super difficult to hire great talent. For many organisations, this requires thinking a little bit outside the box. And in this episode, in the Shortlist, we're going to examine the benefits of hiring globally and how this can be a game changer for many organisations. So the added value that international talent can bring to an organisation is significant, of course, in terms of skills, experience, and international exposure, but also as well as increased diversity and greater innovation. But how do you go about hiring international talent? Where do you start? What are some of the pitfalls and benefits? Joining us today on the Shortlist, and excuse the noise that is coming from a live, busy environment here today, but we're joined by Karin Bjorkman. She's the founder of Beyondo. And Karin is a consultative partner and talent advisor with more than 2 decades of experience in international recruiting in the Netherlands and Sweden. She spent 17 years with Undutchables Recruitment Agency as a recruitment and executive consultant before setting up the Swedish arm of Undutchables. And last summer, Karin set up her own agency, Beyondo, connecting candidates to international job opportunities. Karin, you're so very welcome to the show. It's wonderful to have you here. Tell us where you're joining us from. Tell us about the snow, where you are today, and why this topic is particularly of interest to you.
I'm joining you from Stockholm, and thank you for having me on your show. We had code orange last night, so we had 0.5 meter of snow, so we had to dig up the car to bring our son to school this morning. So normally in March it's very nice spring weather here, but no, we got snow again. First of all, I'm a huge fan of social talent, and I've been following your education, and I have a black belt, so very proud of that. I'm very passionate about international recruitment, as I have been living abroad myself and have experienced how it is to move to new countries, learning new languages, looking for new jobs in new countries. And I made it my profession to help others in doing that. So I've had the privilege to work with very big organizations to help them with the recruitment, and especially then of recruitment of international talents.
So Karin, as we broadcast in March 2023, it seems that everybody is embracing the opportunity of hiring international talent, and maybe they think about hybrid working as well. But this isn't something new to you. You've been doing this for a long time. So maybe talk to me about international recruiting pre-2020. Tell me a little bit about that environment. Maybe share your story of being an international employee of different organizations in different countries and what your experience was like as well.
Yeah, so I've lived in Switzerland, where I also did my education, and there I met my Dutch husband, which brought me to the Netherlands. And we're looking for a job in the Netherlands. I didn't speak any Dutch at that moment, so I was looking for a job where I could maybe use Swedish. And then I came in contact with Undutchables, which is a recruitment agency for internationals in the Netherlands. They only recruit non-Dutch speakers. So I looked for a job via them, but then they ended up hiring me. So I did my career within their organization for, my experience there is that you come to a new country and not knowing the language, but you do have a good background, educational background, and good work experience, and you really want to, get going. Undutchables is there a very good example on what is pre-March 2023, because they celebrated their 25th anniversary 2 years ago during the COVID. But they started from day one hiring international talents. So there I was helping them setting up an office in Eindhoven. They were only 5 years old, and they had already 20 employees out of 15 different nationalities, for example. So it is possible if you're just open to it, and it's a very good example that you can create so much more when mixing different nationalities.
So at the conference I'm at here today, the first keynote speaker shared some data around hybrid and remote working in 2023. And the speaker compared the companies who are office only, the companies who are hybrid, and the companies who are online only, let's say are completely remote. And it showed that the number of companies who are office only is decreasing between 2023 and 2022. It showed that the number of companies who are fully remote is decreasing, like a substantial amount. But the number of companies who are hybrid has gone up to, I think, something like 52 or 53%. So we're seeing this shift that definitely office only is currently becoming the exception. And we're seeing a kind of revolt, though, against pure remote. So where does that leave us when we look at hiring international talent? Do you think hiring international talent will be as much in focus as it perhaps has been the last 2 years, considering maybe the data suggests companies are increasingly embracing something in the middle, a hybrid form? Does hybrid require people to therefore be largely in the same location?
Yeah, so there are, of course, sectors where they really do need talents, which is, for example, then not present on the Swedish market where we mainly operate. Then they need to go abroad to see, okay, where do we find this talent with expertise that we need? And then depending on the role and for example, if it's engineering or construction, etc., it needs to be local, then you need to be in the country. But if there are roles where you can work in a hybrid model or even a remote model, your pool of talents is of course a lot bigger than just taking what's present locally.
Do you see it as something that is dominant in particular sectors, like let's say areas like software or tech? Do you think such companies are more likely to have very international workforces versus, let's say, construction or banking, in terms of maybe more traditional and perhaps in each country would have only a domestic and very local national workforce?
Yeah, exactly. Well, working in IT, it's predominantly English spoken. So those positions, they are being taken or are highly, international talents are then highly wanted. But on the other hand, I'm thinking like, okay, why only within IT? Why couldn't we then, for example, use English in other areas of sectors? And I think the construction business in Sweden, they need a lot of mancraft or handicraft or staff. So they will need to step over to speak English, for example, in order to get the people that they need. And I think that the obstacle in embracing the international talents and wanting to integrate them into your organization is because organizations don't know how to go about, because they think like, oh yeah, but there is a language barrier. Yeah, but if you look beyond the language barrier, if you say no to someone because of a language barrier, you might say no to a future CEO, for example. So it's very much on looking to, okay, where do we need to change in order to open up to see the possibilities or to create the possibilities. I see that with many companies. For example, a lot of expats that comes on for CEO roles for 3 years. I mean, I know it's an incentive to work for a company. You're doing an internal management traineeship, etc., and you get to go to a country to be the country manager, for example. But if you're going to a country for only 3 years, you're not going to learn the local language, because you're going to be sent out to 3 years later to a next country. But then you are operating in an organization as a non-local speaker. So why can't the middle management then also be non-local speakers, for example, or having the mix? Because the higher management, then it's okay not to speak the local language, but the middle management, they need to. So I think, like, okay, if organizations open up to see the benefits on the talent, if you open up then to have English as a company language, then you can welcome so many more talents if you just do not close the doors just because of the local language. However, if you're an international company that wants to open up in Sweden and you're going to do sales in Sweden, for example, then I do understand that you need the local language in that sense. But there's so much more than only sales in Swedish in that sense. So I think removing obstacles where people think that, but that's scary, or we don't know how to do it, etc. Then companies could go a longer way.
I mentioned at the start that there's a massive shortage of skills in so many different areas, and therefore other companies are hiring internationally to fill roles and international talent to fill roles. But is it just for that reason, do you think, that companies should look at international talent? Or are there other benefits apart from, well, we can't find anyone locally, so we have to find an international person? What are the other benefits, do you think, of bringing in international talent, even if there is a local talent that could do the job?
Yeah, I mean, by opening up and look beyond to what your local talent is, you can increase the number of good people that you can hire. But of course, I mean, except for all those cliche things that it increases innovation and creativity, you can just create a better mix. We make the fun, or we joke about them, if you're cooking a soup and you just add salt and pepper, then you have a flat soup. But if you add some basil and other spices to it, you create a better soup. So why don't do that with your staff in that sense?
I love that analogy. So it makes me think then about the move to a lot of diversity focus for organizations. And organizations will be focusing on diverse workforces. And often they look at, let's say, the color of somebody's skin, their gender, etc., which absolutely important factors that you mix it up, you drive more diversity. But a lot of the conversation is about diversity because the consumer or the client of the customer is increasingly diverse. And it's very difficult to produce, for example, an Irish person making a soup for someone in Kenya won't have an appreciation of what is preferable to the Kenyan palate, because that person only knows what Irish people like. So talk to me about this, increasingly international world in which we operate in, and the importance, therefore, of your workforce representing the diversity of your customer base.
Yeah, exactly. You're saying that you need to mirror the customer base that you have. We have a major streaming service here in Sweden. They say that we have customers from the age of 1, for example, till 99, and they're from Sweden all around the globe back to Sweden. So we need to mirror our employees to what our customers are. And if people or companies has that mindset, they will open up to do even more sales. I mean, unconsciously you're excluding a lot of customers just by thinking one path. But if you open up and say, like, okay, we will make brown face creams and then only blank face creams. I mean, then you open up to sell even more, for example. So it's about thinking thinking on, okay, where can we sell our products, and where are our customers, and then mirror then the organization, and then the organization is then very motivated and to make it happen.
I spoke recently with a VP of HR from a massive food company who make a lot of consumer foods, a lot of brands we have in our cupboards, and he was telling me that their company's policy is around their product innovation, for example, is to look at international brands, and they have many international brands, soft drinks and foods that we all know well, but they also have very local brands that they keep local, because they're recognizing that cultures, there's common brands and tastes across many different cultures, but different cultures have different preferences and tastes. And it's really important for them to have that variety, to have folks who understand local tastes and can cater for that, but also can build international brands and products. And that kind of global experience where you combine that local combination with global. To your soup analogy, you don't want to all eat Campbell's tomato soup.
Exactly.
The flavor and the richness is in the diversity of those different products. But tell me about the practical steps of, if you're an organization that is predominantly, let's call it a monoculture, which a lot of, let's say, traditional business would be, where you've hired domestically, you've hired from one region, not many international staff, maybe you've had a few over the years. How does one go about beginning to hire more international talent? And then what are some of the challenges that you might not expect that exist in trying to bring in international talent to that homogenous culture?
Well, first of all, there's so many things that you can do, but starting with only small steps would help. I think looking to your organization is key, and that the whole organization is on the same page. I mean, you can't have a hiring manager who does not want to move away from the homogeneous group, and you have an HR manager who really wants to embrace the diversity. So everyone needs to be on the same page. So education within the company is very important. As I said, I'm a very huge fan of the social talent, and the education of the people who recruits the people is very important, because you can't have someone who has, for example, no international experience, then sitting in recruiting international people. So it's very important to train the organization, or look into what do we need in order to open up. So you can't say like, okay, well, we need international talent because it's good for us. No, you need to be ready for it as an organization, and also the willingness. And if you don't have that, then it's going to be different or difficult. But there are so many steps. I mean, for example, hiring a recruiter who's international, for example, or send all the people for social talent courses, for example. So small steps, and I hear from a lot of clients that they say like, oh yeah, but there's so many things we need to do. Where do we start? And it's like, yeah, we just start with the beginning and do small steps, and then you will see. The things will come automatically, but you need to have the willingness and the cooperation from the whole organization.
Are there often challenges, Karin, when it comes to adapting to qualifications, for example? So, accountancy qualifications. I used to recruit accountants, and I used to only international recruitment like you. And I found, obviously, that there's accountancy qualifications in the US, where they have the CPA qualification. In England and Wales and other kind of Antipodean regions, it's chartered accountants, certified management accountants. But in markets like Italy, you didn't follow a formal qualification in accountancy. It was more your degree and master's. And I found it very difficult to move international talent around, because there was a lack of understanding of the standardization of qualifications. Does that happen in many different industries where technical qualification is required, that there's kind of inability to translate different qualifications across different borders?
Yes, of course. There are a lot of like institutes or organizations that do translate degrees in that sense, so that you can see, okay, your education in that country is equal to this country. And I think that's also very important to raise that awareness as well, because if you have recruiters who only knows about this education in Sweden or this education in the UK, they will only seek candidates that comes from that education. So again, awareness from what the degrees can be, and not being afraid of challenging that as well. You're mentioning the finance area. I would say that would be sort of okay to transform your skills to other countries, because there are numbers, and there the gaps and IFRS standards are fairly similar now all over. But it would be maybe more difficult for a legal counsel, for example, that really needs to know the local legal regulations. But yes, you're mentioning something that is important. But I think there again, it's not knowing what other educations could be. So awareness and also, I mean, okay. I'm convinced, okay, I work with recruitment and I advise clients, but I'm convinced that there is no perfect match. So I think you also have to look to a number of things when looking to a profile, not only the credentials, but also what have they been doing and what can they do with the experience that they have, and also the personality, what would be a fit. And I think looking more objective to a profile, I think then you can, I wouldn't say you can always match everything in, but then you will increase the possibilities in finding solutions.
So about 15 years ago, Karen, my job involved recruiting people to come to the Cayman Islands and to the Caribbean in general. And whilst focusing on the skills, the talents, trying to attract people and assess them was really important, half the job was involved in the non-job elements, which typically involved whether the person had a family who was going to relocate with them, whether you had to research schools, try and find a job for the partner, look at the suitability of the local environment to their background and whether they were successful there. And I found it was an immensely different job than moving people in one country, which is what I'd done prior to that. It was a very different skill set. It was much more encompassing. You have to become expert in so many more things. And you have to balance the legal issues, such as not asking about someone's family circumstances early in a process because it might bias them. But you still practically have to understand, do they have a spouse? Do they have children that need schooling? Because these are real considerations that help them get there. So what's your advice and your experience in that bigger piece of mobility, which is actually the practicalities of moving a person who usually is attached or often attached to a bigger family? And how do you balance those needs with the typical recruiting process?
Yeah, exactly. Because if the spouse is not happy, then the recruitment won't be happy either. So it's a very important ingredient in the relocation and international movement. However, it does, like, international recruitment does not necessarily need to be that you are actually moving one family or one person to another country with a job. I mean, yes, with the expats regulations, yes, but in today's world, there are so many people that are choosing to move themselves. You can recruit people that really want to relocate, or they have already really relocated. For example, at Undutchables, we were making jokes about that 99% of the recruitments that we did was recruiting love refugees. So so you move to a country. I'm one myself, because I met a Dutch person and I moved to the Netherlands. So you have the intention on moving to a country, wanting to integrate, willing to adapt and be in a country and be able to use your skills. And that's another aspect of international talents as well, because then you don't really actually take them from one country and move them because you need the skills. The skills might be around the corner, even if they're not locals. You know?
So this growing newer area of international hiring where you don't actually need to physically move anybody, typically involves some legal implications, right? So we've seen this big growth of the EORs, employer of record organizations. So explain that to me. Explain the mechanics of how people actually do it and do it legally, so that you have an employee who may never move to a different country, may stay in their home country, and you don't necessarily have an office or a legal jurisdiction there. How do employers get around that, or how do they work around those systems?
Or do you mean that if I would stay in Sweden, but I will work for an Irish company, or
Yeah, you come work for social talent, but you stay in Sweden and you live in
yeah,
Sweden 350 days of the year. So talk to me about how do I make that happen? Because it's not so
yeah,
simple as I just give you a contract.
no, exactly, because if you if you live in a country, you would need to pay local taxes, and then you would need to show that you have a local income. So should I work for social talent but living in Sweden, there are opportunities via a number of companies that can legally hire me in Sweden on a social talent, or like on a contract with them, but working them for you, me living in Sweden. So it's this remote working construction. So it's possible.
And how have you seen companies handle the challenges of normalizing salaries across markets? So, for example, if I have a team of product managers, all based in the UK, and I decide that my next two roles are going to be hired internationally, and I hire somebody based in Lisbon and someone based in San Francisco. Those two markets have very different salaries
Yeah,
than
yeah.
the UK market, let's say. So how are you seeing hiring companies balance those different challenges today?
Yes, of course. Yeah, salaries are according to national markets, but you see a number of companies applying secondary benefits that are from the country where the head office is, for example. I mean, you see. I'm not sure if I can mention any names, but you see a lot of major Swedish companies having what Sweden is very known for is maternity leave for a year and a half, and that the partners can split this. I mean, on an International Women's Day, this is a nice topic to raise. They give that to their employees in America also, for example. So you can move around those benefits, and basically you can do as a company what you want, as long as it's not less than the local legislation.
So if Simon Johnson, who's listening live, asking, so you're basically outsourcing your personal payroll administration. Is that what we're saying here? That you're outsourcing the legal and administrative burden and responsibility of payroll to a company that has a legal entity in the jurisdiction where you want to hire.
Exactly. Yeah. Should I come and work for you, but wanting to stay in Stockholm? Yes.
And so, Simon, just for my context there, so at Social Talent, we've embraced international hiring. We used to always, of course, hire lots of international talent in Ireland, but with an organisation that only has an Irish legal entity, we were restricted by the people actually living in Ireland. But we had a
Yeah.
diverse international group of people, as you do in the Irish market. But since 2020, we worked with an employer of record outsource partner. We use a company called Deal, but there are many, and they act as the legal employer in that country.
Yeah.
But for all intents and purposes, the employee is an employee of ours. And just as you mentioned, Karen, we offer the same benefits to those employees, but we do it through the payroll of that organization. They manage the legal obligations. But there's another side to that, which is sometimes the jurisdiction you're hiring in may have better legal requirements around benefits. You might have more benefits that are legally you're obliged to give to somebody in a market that you as a company don't necessarily give. The US employers have this a lot. Let's say a US employer might give 10 days holiday of vacation a year, hires someone in Sweden, well, you can't give them 10 days vacation because you have to follow Swedish.
But they won't take the job.
And they won't take the job. So I think there is that piece where it's not only do you have to normalize it, but you have a local advisor who helps you with those laws and requirements. It could be working hours. And there's many, it's not just payroll administration. There are a whole host of HR and legal responsibilities to understand. But tell me therefore, what is the benefit of having a partner who has this expertise? Because surely that plays a part, Karen. If you're considering international hiring, and it's better to have a partner who really understands this. And maybe
Yeah,
you could walk me through some of the benefits of working with an expert like yourself and your organization that have that knowledge.
yeah, absolutely.
So what are some of those benefits? What are some of the kind of key
Ah,
reasons why an organization would partner with an organization like yourselves to to um, to do this or to understand this?
okay, so I don't predominantly do the payrolling for other. So I do mainly direct recruitment, but I have partners then doing this. Yeah, for organizing the remote work. But the best benefit that you can get then by working with such a partner is that it's done correctly, and that you do offer your employees what's conform to the market, and that you um, that you do it right, because you want your employees to be happy, of course. So you should go by the books.
And of course, you don't want to be sued either. There's always
Exactly.
the legal risk as well, which is interesting. So,
Exactly.
so
Yeah.
I want to go back to the topic of the diversity of the talent and that potential, Karen. So from your, either empirical evidence or your anecdotal evidence from working with customers, what are the benefits of international teams staffed with people from many different nationalities and backgrounds? What do you see as the core benefits, and where would you say the most benefit can be found in terms of what kind of roles or sectors do you think the most benefit from having an international team can be found?
Well, first of all, yeah, as I said, the cliche things in creativity and innovation, but you have a larger pool of talents, and you if you go with that, you will also mirror the society, and you can gain a lot of trust from your clients also by doing that. If I look to the international teams that I've been working with, you enrich yourself as a person with working with someone who's different to you. One could think like, oh yeah, language barrier. Oh no, that person is so different to me. But you learn so much from others. Okay, you can learn from someone who's native Swedish as well, but there are other aspects that you learn. I mean, I personally think it's fantastic to learn how others are celebrating certain traditions, for example, or how people see different things. I mean, we are all biased, and if you have only grown up in one country and you've never been abroad, you only know your story, sort of. But if you speak to other people from various backgrounds, the mix of who you can become yourself is so much better.
So what's your advice if you're going to try and find international talent to come work for you in a different country? Short of course, advertising it and people reaching out and saying, "Hi, I'd like to work for you from a different country," how would you go about sourcing or trying to find somebody who's probably more open to a role like that? Like, do you look for certain things? Are there keywords, particular backgrounds you search for? Like, how do you distinguish people who are more likely to want to do this and be successful in doing so from all of the people out there?
No, we would always look to what a person's story is. I mean, have they been living abroad? What was the reason for that, and what have they been doing, and what languages do they speak, and why, etc. Yeah, because it's like the top of the iceberg. You only see a dark person, for example, but you don't know what's below there. And if you really dig into it and ask questions, you can get so much information that will be beneficial for the hiring process.
Yeah, I remember when we used to search for folks, we'd look for, to your point, someone with multiple languages.
Yeah,
We look for someone who's previously worked abroad. We look for someone who maybe has studied abroad.
yeah,
Some sort of connection, done an internship, done a work placement.
Yeah.
I think the hardest person is somebody who's never been abroad, has no aptitude for languages, has no, has nothing on their resume or background that would indicate that this person would want to work abroad. They may still want to work abroad or work for a foreign company,
Yeah.
but to try and find someone who has a connection already at any point in their life, a parent in a different country, they studied, did Erasmus in a different country. These to
Yeah.
me were the breadcrumbs I used to find on LinkedIn
Yeah.
profiles and Facebook profiles that would say, well, I could start a conversation with this person.
Yeah.
I remember I used to hire people to come to Ireland. You would find people who perhaps studied in Ireland for a month when they were 16, and I would call them up and say, well, do you remember, I see you studied here. Did you enjoy it? Like, can I
Yeah.
talk? I love it. It's such a
Yeah.
great time. But would you ever consider coming back? Do you ever visit
Yeah.
people? And they're like, yes, I love the
Yeah.
country. And you
Yeah.
start going, well, maybe you don't have to move country, but we're saying we have a company full of Irish people. You could work there. You could travel once a year, meet your colleagues, have a reason to come back. Making that connection is really important to
Yeah. And
try and
also, and also,
try.
and also, I read somewhere like, okay, if you have an accent, don't blame that person for having the accent, but see it as braveness, because they are trying to speak, or they have learned, a new language, and also the majority of people that are moving around and choosing to move countries. I think they're very brave, and they are curious. So they have. I don't like the word of mindset, but they do have a different mindset, which will also make them more flexible in learning what they need to learn for doing the job that they are going to do.
Yeah, my experience is there's a resilience as well of somebody who
Yeah.
has spent time
Yeah.
abroad. There's
Yeah.
independence. You don't have your family structures around you to support you. You have to go out and make
Exactly.
new friends and to learn
Yeah.
a new culture.
Yeah.
That usually leads someone to be more open-minded. And
Yeah.
Karen, it's been fascinating hearing your own background on this topic. I think we are increasingly living in a world where talent is much more mobile, even if
Yeah.
not physically mobile. We've got ways of working that don't even require you to move borders. You can
Yeah.
digitally, as we are today, talk across multiple borders, across multiple oceans and seas,
Yeah.
and work together. But I was wondering, as we draw to a close, if you could leave our audience with one tip today from your own experience or background, whether it's recruiting international talent, being an international talent, or whatever it might be, what would that one final tip be?
Yeah. So I'm gonna say the thing I'm going to say is the idea behind my company Beyondo, because the international talents, when they move around and move to another country, and wherever you take a new job, etc., you of course need to adapt and be open, etc. But in this, you must not forget to be yourself. So be you and do. And that's the idea behind our company name, Beyondo. So I would say, be yourself and just do it.
I love that. Fantastic advice. As somebody who was an expat working abroad myself, I say the same thing to people. It's do it. Like, you will
Yeah.
never regret it.
Yeah.
I see it in people that I worked with. I see that 15, 20 years later, their careers have far exceeded the levels of people that were working alongside them who never did it. And
Yeah.
just there's something there. There's definitely a commonality where people
Yeah.
who dare to be brave, who just do it and take the chance, they
I
inevitably,
had
for whatever reason, become so much more successful and happier in their career.
I had a fun thing happening last week. I got an email from a candidate that I recruited 20 years ago. And he went to the Undutchables office with a bottle of bubbles. He knew I wasn't there anymore. And unfortunately, Undutchables had a home office day. So he emailed me and saying like, okay, I wanted to bring this to your ex-colleagues because I love the way you saw my talents 20 years ago. And then he wrote then what that particular job has made his life today, with a successful family life and a successful career. So he wanted to come and thank us 20 years later. And I think that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, I must admit.
I love it. I often think about the people I moved across the world for different jobs and hope that it was a positive experience. And I hear from many of them and keep in touch with them, and they're like, it's
Yeah.
immensely rewarding. and a great thing to do. Karen,
Yeah.
thanks so much for sharing your journey on recruiting internationally, mobility, the benefits from external talent, and international hiring. It's been great having you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening and joining us here today. As I said, live from the Talent Summit here in Guinness Storehouse in Dublin. Excuse my background noise. Hopefully that hasn't been too distracting for our conversation with Karen today. We'll be back in studio next week as normal for our next shortlist. But we're going to be talking about why equity matters more than diversity or inclusion. Have you ever wondered what is the E in DEI and why it comes first? Let's have that conversation. We're going to be joined by Aubrey Blanche. She's the founder and CEO of the Math Path. Aubrey is a fantastic person who really has fought hard for equity in the world, in the workplace, over her career. She's joining us live from the US, live from the West Coast of the US next week. And that's going to be live on LinkedIn and YouTube on the 15th of March at 4 p.m. Irish time, 11 a.m. in New York, and also 8 a.m. on the West Coast of the US. Or if you can't make us live, you can catch the podcast as it drops on your podcast app by Wednesday evening, Thursday morning. Until then, thanks for listening. We'll see you next week.